Hey dev team, welcome back to Flutter with Drag. Today I want to get the profile page of our app done, and without further ado, let's just get on with it. Now before we do that, I am in the code, the users.typescript code for the server, because there's one little change. It's not important, but I think it would just make things a little tidier. And that is right at the bottom when we get a particular user, we give an ID, we're returning the JSON with the ID of that user and all the data. And for the user, I'm just going to change this to UID because that's used commonly around a lot of places, UID, so standing for user ID. So I'm going to put that in just to make it easier. It'll work perfectly well either way. It's just for some readability. So I'm going to save that, and that should be all the changes we're going to be making to the server today, which if you look at the bottom here on my terminal is running, and so we can now get on with our Flutter app. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to hit Control F5 and I'm just going to wait for it to compile. Okay, there we are, we're up and running. Let's crack on. So we're going to be getting user information back. So let's start off in our models folder where we have our conf event model, and let's create a user profile model. So I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call that user profile.dart. And in there we're going to have a class called user profile, and the data we're going to have for our user profile is going to be a string, which is the user ID, string, it's going to be a final, which is going to be the name of the user, and the final string profile, which is going to be the profile text of the user. Let's create our constructor for that field. That's not quite what I want. I want these to be named constructors, so we'll put that in the curly brackets, and also they're going to be required, so little mouse button all the way down, required. Okay, so when we create this class, we're going to require a user ID, we're going to require the username, and we're going to require a profile. As we did with our events, I want this to be copyable, so we're going to put in the copy with annotation, and I also want it to be serializable, so I'm going to put in the JSON serializable annotation. And with those two in place, we can specify our part file, which has to be called the same thing, with a .g.dart. So that's generated. So I'm going to save that, and of course that file doesn't exist yet, and I need it to exist. So I'm going to come to our terminals, create a new terminal, and run flutter pub run build runner build, and we'll give that a few seconds. Okay, about 16 seconds later, we now have that user profile, and now we can just create our static method that is going to convert from JSON into a user profile object. So we're going to have a static user profile, which we're going to call from JSON. That is going to take a map of string dynamic, JSON string. We're going to call JSON, and then we're going to call a private function user profile from JSON, and that of course has been created for us in the user's profile.g.dart. Alright, that's that done. Okay, now we need a page or a screen for this user profile, so let's come to our screens folder, and we already have a home. Let's create a new screen or a new folder, and we're going to call this profile. And in that folder, we're just going to create another file called profile.dart. And that is where we're going to build our profile. So we're going to create a stateless widget called profile screen and extend our material. So how do we want this screen to look? Well, I'm going to play a little bit here with slivers because I want our profile, if we look at the mock-up that we've got, which I'm just putting on screen, we've got a profile image that takes up a lot of space, and that's all well and good, but I want that to disappear as the user scrolls up. So if the user's written, if they have a long profile, it'll scroll up out of the way. That's the task. That's what we're going to attempt. So let's start with the page. First of all, it's going to have a scaffold, and just for a second I'm just going to put in a container for the body and come to our main.dart, and where we're currently pulling in the home screen, I'm just going to change that to the profile screen, so it's the main screen on our app just for now. So we'll save that, and we've now got a blank canvas, and then we'll switch that back around afterwards. Okay, so the first thing within our scaffold is I want a bottom navigation bar, as we saw in the image. So let's put that in straight away, and that's part of the scaffold. And we simply can do that with a Flutter widget that's already created for us called bottom navigation bar. That takes some items, and the items are a bottom navigation bar item. That takes an icon. So I'm going to have the two things. The first one is going to be icons.account circular, or account circle. We've got an error because it's saying to have a bottom navigation bar you need more than one item. Well, that's fair enough. I'm just going to copy that and paste that in, and the other icon is going to be, for now, calendar month. Not entirely sure what they're going to do yet. We're going to change that around. Okay, our next error is everything must have a label. So let's put in a label for them, and that is just some text. So that's going to be profile, and then the label for the calendar is going to be calendar, events, something, don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be something. I'm also going to put const at the top here to get rid of that blue squiggly line and put in the label. Okay, let's save that. Now we have those at the bottom. Do we want to leave them that colour? No, I don't think we do. We'll go a little bit with the design. So in our bottom navigation, we're going to set the background colour to the appcolors.primary. Okay. We're going to set the unselected item colour to colors.white, and we're going to select the selected item colour to appcolors.orange. And for now I'm just going to set the show selected labels to false and show unselected labels to false, and we'll get rid of the text. Whether we put all that back or not is for the future. That's bottom navigation bar done, and we'll worry about the rest of it later. I'm going to extract that to its own widget, and I'm going to call it profile bottom nav, and in the profile directory, I'm going to create a new folder called widgets, and in there a new file called bottom navigation, bottom nav, that'll do, Dart. And from our profile, I'm just going to cut the bottom navigation out and paste it into there. And of course we need to import our material and also our app colors. Okay, back to our profile.dart, and let's just import that from the widget. And it's saying it can be a const. So there we go. That's the bottom navigation done. We can forget about it. Right, the next part is going to be more interesting. So here we're going to have a scroll view. And although we're going to have an app bar, I'm not going to do it as part of the scaffold. We're going to do it as part of the body. So the body is going to be a nested scroll view. And a nested scroll view needs something called a header slivers builder. And that takes a context, or doesn't take, that gives us a context and something that says inner box is scaled. And what that's going to be is a sliver app bar. And this is where the sliver app bar is going to go. And that is going to take a flexible space. And in here we're going to have a flexible space bar. And this is going to have some things that are required. Yeah, sorry. This header sliver builder is a list. I just need to wrap that in a list. Okay. So we have a list of items. So we've got this flexible space bar. This flexible space bar is going to have a background, and the background is going to be an image which we're going to get later on from our profile, but we're not storing images yet in our profile. So for now we're just going to return a cached network image, and the image URL is just something I've picked off the internet for now, https from pixum.photo. It is a photo which has an ID of 1074, and I'm going to specify a width and a height of 800 and 500. This whole image is going to have a fit of boxfit.cover. Okay, we can see how this works now. This nested scroll view also needs a body, so I'm just going to come down here and put a body in, and for now I'm just going to put a container. We'll worry about that later. And the the sliver app bar needs an expanded height, and I'm going to put in a height of 250. Right, so we're getting an error for the image, and that's because I've got the URL wrong. It's pixum.photos. There we go. Now we've got our image in. Now that scrolls and disappears as we expand. It is also an app bar. So at the moment we've come to this page directly, but if we had navigated to this page, we would have a back button at the top left here that we will utilize later on. Okay, so that is our app bar done. Next thing we want after our app bar is a header. because I want to put our name here as per the design, but when I scroll it up I want the name to remain at the top. So although the image has disappeared, the name is going to stay. So to do that we need a sliver persistent header, and that takes a delegate. Now before we create our delegate, we're going to set two other things here. First of all, pinned, I'm going to set to true. That means it gets pinned to the top. And also floating true, which basically means when we scroll up it'll go to the top, and when it comes down it will instantly show. Now although it's pinned and it's going to remain true, if we don't do this, one of the calculations that happens later on is going to go a bit weird, so that just sorts out a little problem for us, even though it's sort of redundant. Okay, the delegate then is going to be something that we need to create, and I'm just going to call this the profile name bar, like so. Okay, let's come down and create that. It's a class, profile name bar, and it extends a sliver persistent header delegate. That's going to have some overrides, so let's create them. So the override is going to be the build, and then the other overrides we need to do are the max extent, i.e. what is the maximum size of this, what is the minimum size of it, and should we rebuild. So let's get rid of the to-dos because we're going to do all of that now. The should rebuild is going to be false. There's nothing in here that's going to require us to rebuild it once it's been built the first time. Nothing's changing. The minimum extent, well, I'm just going to throw in the numbers for now because I don't actually want this to shrink. If you think about this image we've already got here, it shrinks, and the maximum extent is 250 and the minimum extent is 0 because it's disappeared. For our name bar, I want them to stay the same, so I'm going to set them both to 50, and that's going to set that height. And then the build, we're going to return a container. And let's just say for now colors.red and save that, and there you go. You can see we've now got our bar that is there, and it goes up and it then locks at the top. It doesn't matter how much further I try and scroll up, it's not going anywhere. That's going to remain up there for us. Okay, so what do we want within this bar? Well, I want three things. First of all, on the left hand side here, when it's at the top, we've lost our back button. I said there was going to be a back button up here in the image, and that's true, but when it's there it's gone, so I'm going to want a back button there. I'm going to want our name, and I also want to have an edit icon over here so we can edit the profile. So if we've got three items, that says to me we need a row. So let's leave the color red in there just for now so we can see it, and make the child a row. Rows have children, and the first thing we're going to have is a icon, and the icon is going to be icons.arrowback. Save that, and there's our icon. And you'll notice now that the height has just changed, but we'll deal with that in a second. The next thing is going to be text, and the text is going to be the profile name. Have that. Okay. And the final item is also going to be an icon, and this is going to be an icons.edit. Yeah, that works. Okay, so those are the three things that we want in there. Now I want our name to expand across. I want the icons to be stuck on the sides and the name to expand. So I'm going to come in to the name, the text, and I'm going to wrap that with an expanded widget, and that will force everything over. Excellent. I'm going to wrap the icon with a padding, and we're going to put, let's have a look, is 8 good enough? I think 8 is fine. And we're going to do that for the other icon as well. Wrap with padding 8, that will bring it in. And that's all good. Now what happens if, let's just put this const in just to get rid of this underline. I'm going to leave those in because we are going to take that out in a minute, and we'll have to put them back in here when we do. So what happens if we have a super long name? Well, at the moment that pushes onto 2 lines. Maybe that's okay, but I'm not sure I want that. So I'm going to put this text again inside another widget called fitted box, and that will shrink down the text to fit in that one line. So if someone's got a very long name, it will shrink down. If they've got a very small name, it's going to be huge. We don't necessarily want it to be huge like that, but we'll deal with that in a second. Let's put some style in. So the style for this text, I want to be our app font headline 2, but I want to change the font size, so I'm going to do copy with size, font size of 30. And now doing that, it's complaining that it can't do it because it's in a constant constructor. So this is where we have to take out that const. And then we have others, but we're not worried too much. Let's save that. That's got it right, but it's still huge. And that's because all the sizing information is coming from this expanded and the fitted box. So again, if we've got a longer name, that will shrink down. Let's get rid of this red now. We don't need that red any longer, and save that. And just put this back to profile name. As you can see, that text is just a little bit too big, and that's because this fitted box is inside this expanded. So let's just wrap this fitted box inside a, no, not a column, inside a container. That would help. Inside a container, and we'll put some padding in there, and that would be edge inset symmetric, and just on the top and the bottom, so on the vertical, and let's try 8. See what that looks like. There we go. I think that looks all right. Okay, so when we scroll up, it goes up, but now we've got this problem that the status bar disappears underneath the, we've got the problem that the bar is underneath this app area here, and we need to push that down a little bit. And we can do that by calculating the space of the safe area, if you like, at the top. Now to do that, we're going to need to have a context in here, and we haven't got that at the moment. So I'm going to create a final build context called context. I'm going to call it parent p context, the parent context, because we've already got a context inside, and that's different. and I'm going to create a final double called top padding. So we're going to need both of those sent in, so it's going to be a required p context, and we're going to work out the top padding in the initializer. We're going to say that the top padding is going to equal media query, not that, media query of the parent context, view padding top, and that will give us the safe area padding that's needed at the top. Now we're also going to need to extend the height of our bar, so for both of these it's going to be equal to the 50 plus the top padding. And then finally, in our container at the top, we're going to put padding edge insets only top, and it's going to be the size of the top padding. Let's save that and refresh the app, and it's not going to work because we're not sent in the context. So the p context is going to equal the context. Right, let's save that now. There we are. You saw how that shifted down a bit, but it now means we've got this space up there. I haven't yet got an elegant way of getting rid of that space, but I'm going to work on that. Okay, that keeps that off the top, and that looks okay. The next thing is I want the arrow only to appear when this is at the top, and I want the edit bar or the edit button only to appear when it's not at the top. So we need a way of figuring that out, and there's a few ways of doing it, but I'm going to go for a very quick way at the moment. And I'm going to say in here, in our build, we have this shrink offset. And if we print that out and watch our debug console, as we move, our shrink offset changes. So when it's not near the top, it's a 0, and when it gets near the bottom, when at the moment. So what we can say up here is final bool at top equals if the shrink offset is greater than 0.0. So now if we print the at top, it's false, false, and it hits the top and it's true. And so we can use that within the app. So within around our icon and the padding, I'm going to wrap that with another widget called visibility. And it's going to be visible if we're at the top. But doing that, it sort of disappears, and when it comes to the top, as you can see, it sort of jumps back. I don't like that jumping. I want it to keep its space. So to do that, we can do maintain size true. But for that to work, we also need to do maintain animation true and maintain state true. And now when we save that, it appears just at the top. So we can do the same on the other side, padding, and we're going to wrap with a widget visibility, maintain size true, maintain state true, maintain animation true, and the actual visible is going to be at top, except we don't want it to be visible when it's at the top, so we'll inverse that with a not at top. Save that, and that's taken care of that. Finally, I want to change the icon color here to be appcolors.primary, and now it's complaining that it can't be a const. Oh, sorry, it's complaining it is a const, so we'll put a const in there and take it out of there. And the same with the other one, colors.primary, and just flip our consts around. Okay, so that's our profile screen. Okay, so now we just need to put in the profile text. So let's come up to where we have this body and the container, and we're going to replace this container with our text widget, that this is the profile text. Save that. Now you just saw there a little problem that we've now got. That disappears behind this profile name and to the top of the screen. That's not what we need. We somehow need to stop this scrolling at this point here. But we do want it scrollable because depending on what's in this area, we might need to scroll it up. We can make it disappear simply behind there by putting a background color on that widget so it goes behind it, but that's not the problem that we need to fix. So how do we do that? Well, what we need to do is find out the height of this header. Let's just put a comma in there to format it correctly. And we can do that by wrapping this inside a sliver overlap absorber. Now, a sliver overlap absorber takes a sliver rather than a child. It also takes a handle, and the handle is going to be nested scroll view sliver overlap absorber handle for, and the context. In this case, it's this context. Okay, that's great. What do we do with that? Well, we can use that in another sliver. So at the moment in the body, we've just got the text coming. But in fact, if we turn that itself into a scrollable container, which we can do by putting into a custom scroll view, and the custom scroll view takes slivers, and we can put as one of our slivers our text, except text isn't a sliver, so we can wrap that within a sliver to box adapter. That takes a child, and that child is going to be text. This is my profile text. Okay, now if we look at that, not much has changed, except now this is my profile has disappeared completely behind this widget. So what we can do is we can put in here as the first sliver in this a sliver overlap injector, and we need to put in the same handle context. And we do that with a nested scroll view sliver optional handler for, just wrap this onto more lines so you can see what's going on, for the context. Now, our problem is we haven't got a context here. So to get a context, we need to wrap this custom scroll view with a builder, and then we have got a context that we can use. And this is just complaining because it's not const, but it doesn't matter at the moment. So let's save that And now you can see that the text is below because this overlap injection is basically working out the amount of space that this is taking up. And of course, don't forget, this might expand or contract. It doesn't in our case, but it might. Okay, now we've got another problem. Now our Boolean to work out whether we've reached the top isn't working. And that's because this sliver is never going underneath the profile name. So we can fix that in a very cheaty way by just making our maximum extent 1 pixel bigger. And now when we get to the top, we are redoing that calculation, and you don't really notice that 1 pixel jump. Okay. Next, we want to wrap this profile text in some padding. So inside our sliver box adapter, well, outside of our sliver box adapter, we can wrap this with padding, except padding won't work because padding isn't a sliver. But we can just add the word sliver to the front of that and it becomes a sliver. And I'm going to put 16 on that padding, go all the way around. Okay. We need to change this not to a child but to a sliver. Okay, that puts our padding in. That's looking fine. Okay, so let's do a hard reset, make sure that's all working. That's all right. So at the moment this doesn't work because there's nowhere to go back to. So let's come to our main.dart and put back our home screen. Okay, so we're back at our home screen, and from there, let's come to our home.dart. We want a way of getting to that profile page. Well, for now I'm going to do it in the app bar, and in the app bar I'm going to put an action, and I'm going to put an icon button, and the icon is going to be icons.account circle. That can be a const, and we need an onPressed for that, and the onPressed is going to be, for now, we're going to sort out navigation another time. Navigator push, and we're going to push on a new route, and that's going to be a material page route, and the builder is going to be a context, and we're going to push our profile screen. Let's save that, and there we have our icon. Let's click that and we go to our profile screen, and as promised we have our back button up there which takes us back, and if we scroll up we've got a back button which doesn't take us back yet because we've not coded it. So back to that button which is in our profile name bar, and we're going to come to the button here, the arrow back, and including the padding I'm going to wrap that with a gesture detector and just put on tap, and we're going to say navigator dot pop. That will now take us back. So there it takes us back, and there it takes us back. Okay, that's all looking great. Now our final problem is this data's not real. We're not getting it we've hard-coded it all, and we actually get it from our database and our repository. So let's get that set up. So let's come to our repositories and conference interface, and we're going to, well, I'm just going to copy the first line and paste it in again, and instead of get event, it's going to be get user, and it's going to be a user ID, which we'll just call UID. It's not going to return a conference event, it's going to return a profile, user profile. Okay, let's save that. We've now got an error telling us that our conference.dart doesn't have that, it's missing that one override, so we'll put it in. Okay, so what we want to do is pretty much this. So let's copy that and paste it in here. We're going to get not events but users, and we're going to get the UID that's passed in, and it's going to be an async function, so let's async that. And we're not going to return a conference event, but we're going to return a user profile. And that's it, that's our repository taken care of. So back to our profile page folder, the screen folder, I'm going to right click on that and we're going to add a new qubit, because that's where our state is managed from. And this qubit is going to be called profile underscore screen, and that creates that for us. So let's come into the status first of all, the profile screen status.dart. We've got an initial status, fine, and we're going to have a loaded status. So I'm just going to copy the first line and then put loaded. So this is our state when we first get to the page. This is the state when it's loaded. But when it's loaded, the state is going to have a user profile, which we'll call user profile. That means we need a constructor for it, and it can be a const constructor. Since there's only one element and it's required, we can just leave it as an unnamed constructor. If we have more properties, we might have to change that around later. And we need to override our props to say that this needs to be part of the comparison to check whether the state has changed or not. We do that by putting user profile in there. Okay, that's our state taken care of. Let's come to the qubit itself, and we're going to create in here a private function called load profile. It's going to be an async function, and in it we first of all need to get the user ID of the current user. Well, we haven't yet put in the code for managing user state, so for now we'll just use the Firebase auth. This will have to get changed later. It doesn't have to get changed actually, but it probably will get changed. Neaten it up. So we're going to get a UID. We're going to get it from the Firebase auth instance, current user, and we're going to say that we know we've got a current user because you can't get to this screen unless you're logged in, albeit that's not quite true yet, but it will be. And we'll get the UID for that current user. We're then going to say our user profile, which we'll call profile, is going to equal, and then we need to get something from the repository, but we haven't got access to the repository yet. So let's give ourselves access to that by putting final conference repository, and we'll just call it repository, And we need to get that we need to pass that in when we instantiate this qubit, and we will require the conference repository to be put in. And then within our initializer, we'll say that our private repository equals the repository that the user sends in. Okay, now we've got access to that, we can say repository get user UID. Except we need to await that because it's going to return a future. Once we've got that, we're going to emit our new state, which is going to be the profile screen state loaded, and that takes in the profile. All we need to do now is call this from somewhere, and we can just do that within our constructor because it only needs to be done once. Load profile. So as soon as this is instantiated, it's going to load the profile for us. And that's it. Okay, we can close those down, come back to our profile.dart, where first of all we're going to need to provide that state. And just while I'm down here, I'm just going to get rid of this print at top. Don't need that anymore. So coming right up to the top to our scaffold, going to wrap our scaffold in a block provider, and the provider that we're going to want to provide is our profile screen qubit. Okay, let's import that. Let's also import our Flutter block, and it's giving us an error because it says that we haven't got enough arguments, and that's because it needs the repository, which we can get by doing context read. Okay, so that's set that up. So as soon as this is loaded, nothing happens. Actually, the thing happens when we now listen to that. We need a block builder. So to do that, let's come back down to our nested scroll view, and we're going to wrap that with the block builder. The builder is going to be the profile screen qubit, and it's going to be the state, profile screen state that we get back. So as soon as this is built, that's when the loaded is going to get called. So now in here we can say if state is profile screen initial, then we're going to return for now a circular progress indicator. And let's start putting in some of our consts in there. Else if state is profile screen loaded, then we're going to return this nested scroll view. At the bottom of the nested scroll view, that's the end of our else. But we do need to put an else statement in, and again we should never get here, so I'm just going to return an empty container. This can be a const now. Oh no, it can't, because we're about to change that. So what do we want to change? Well, first of all, profile name. So that is down the bottom here. Now we could build that into here, but I'm actually going to get it passed in. So final string profile name, and we will require that to be passed in. Once that's passed in, we're going to use it here instead of the profile name. Now it's going to be complaining up here that we're not passing it in, so let's pass it in. So the profile name is going to be called the state user profile name. This profile text is going to change. That's going to be state user profile, and that's all we need for now. So if we save that, you can see it changed immediately to be the stuff that is stored in the Firebase. So that is working for us. And should I edit this and save it within the database, then it's all going to get updated. Right, folks, that's it for now. We have got our first part of our screed done. Next time I'm going to look at editing the profile. May or may not include doing the image, I might leave that to another episode, but we'll carry on working with this. If you've enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, it does help me out, and we'll see you next time. Till then folks, take care. Bye now.